This is how to install a LuxCut helical cutter head into a DeWalt DW735 planer. While I'm specifically going to be installing a LuxCut helical cutter head into this planer, the instructions of this video will be broadly the same no matter what sort of cutter head you want to install into this DeWalt planer, whether it be another brand of helical cutter head or a dirty pipe with some rusty kitchen knives welded to it. I won't judge. If you want to know more about my thoughts on this LuxCut cutter head from mywoodcutters.com and some other stuff to do with this planer, that's a separate video and I'll link to it here. Let's get started. These are the tools you'll need for this process. You'll need a T30 Torx screwdriver like the one that comes with your planer. You'll need a T25 Torx screwdriver like the one that comes with the LuxCut cutter head for installing inserts. You'll need some extra pointy needle nose pliers for removing a large snap ring at one point in the process. You'll need some snap ring pliers for removing some regular size snap rings. You'll need a 5mm hex key and a 15/16 or 23mm socket. You'll need a Phillips screwdriver, a caveman screwdriver. You'll need a socket or something large and round for driving a bearing in place. Some channel lock pliers won't hurt. I put some strips of wood on this one to avoid damaging the helical gear that I use these to remove. And naturally, you don't need a drill for this process, but if you do use one to make things faster, make sure it has a clutch so you can clutch way down on it to avoid damaging anything. Let's get started with step one. Remove the 4 T30 Torx screws holding the access hatch in place. Again, the T-handle driver that comes with the planer is just a T30 Torx driver. I'm just using a pocket driver here for speed. Remove the 3 thumb screws holding the dust shroud in place and remove the dust shroud. Remove all the T30 Torx screws holding the knives to the cutter head. Lift the knives and clamping plates out using the magnetic handle of the driver included with the planer. Remove the 2 Phillips screws holding the locking plate in place and remove the locking plate. There's a spring in there, so watch out for that. Don't let it hit you in the eye or anything. You can discard this part. It's not needed for the new helical cutter head. Remove the crank handle. There's just 1 T30 screw holding that in place. Remove the 4 T30 Torx screws holding the pulley side dust cover in place and remove the cover. Remove the tensioning spring and remove the tensioning pulley. Don't wait until later like I did. It gets in the way. Remove the 2 T25 Torx screws holding the roller sprockets in place. Remove the sprockets and chain as a unit to keep them together so the chain spacing is maintained. Take the belt off the pulley. You'll have to roll it off little by little. It's difficult, but you can get it done. Again, the chain tension pulley should be removed before this step. It gets in the way. Remove the nut from the end of the cutter head using either a 23mm or a 15/16 inch socket. To lock the cutter head in place for this, I just dropped a wrench next to the cutter head. Remove the pulley and the washer behind it. Be careful not to lose the key in the shaft. Remove the large snap ring holding the bearing in place. Regular snap ring pliers didn't work for me here, so I had to resort to using these extra long needle nose pliers. Remove the opposite side dust cover. There's just 3 T30 Torx screws holding it in place. Using snap ring pliers, remove the snap rings holding the roller sprockets in place. Undo the tensioning spring and remove the sprockets and chain as a unit to maintain chain spacing, just like you did on the other side. Don't lose the washer behind the drive sprocket. Using a 5mm hex key, remove the 3 screws holding the gearbox in place. Pull the gearbox out, but not all the way out. Just let it dangle there so it's out of the way. Use a hammer and a piece of wood to drive out the cutter head from the gearbox side. Do not use a brass hammer directly on the helical gear like I did. This supposedly non-marring hammer marred up the end of the helical gear pretty well. With the cutter head removed, unscrew the helical gear from the end to transplant onto the new cutter head. I would have unscrewed this gear using the hex shank on the end, but I deformed it with the brass hammer, so instead I used channel lock pliers with wood on the jaws to unscrew the gear. The Lux Cut head comes with new bearings pre-installed, so there's no need to worry about removing the old bearings from the old cutter head. If you'd like, keep the old cutter head around for spare parts. I stored mine somewhere special for safekeeping. The Lux Cut head will not fit through the bearing housings with the carbide inserts in place, so remove those now with a T25 Torx driver. The head should have come with one or two of these in the package. Screw the helical gear from the old cutter head into the new Lux Cut head. Assembly is the reverse of disassembly, so I'll clam up. Reinstall all the inserts into the cutter head. I am using a power drill for this step to speed things up a bit, but I have the clutch set all the way down on its lowest setting to avoid stripping, cross-threading, over-tightening, or otherwise damaging the screws that hold the inserts in place. For final tightening, I'm just using the T-handle screwdriver that came with the cutter head, and I'm tightening them to hand tight. This little T-handle screwdriver makes it difficult to over-tighten the insert screws, so it's not something I would worry about. If you have a torque wrench or a torque screwdriver, tighten the insert screws down to 45 inch-pounds. And that's all there is to it. Now go mill some lumber with your new helical cutter head planer. And don't lose this screwdriver for installing the inserts. It's going to be a while before you need to access that cutter head again, so make sure you keep this screwdriver somewhere safe. I'm going to keep mine right here.